Sadness. Difficulty concentrating. Loss of interest. Depression can be treated. The first step is talking.
Welcome to Healthy Cleveland. I'm your host, Leah Haslage. Today's topic is hepatitis A. With us is Dr. Natalie Hinchcliffe, who is the medical director of the Cleveland Department of Public Health, and Jordan Bryan with the Cleveland Hearing and Speech Center is our American Sign Language interpreter. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Start off by telling us what exactly is hepatitis A and how does it spread?
So hepatitis A is a virus. It mostly affects the liver. And we see and have heard about it most of the time talked about as being spread from what's called fecal oral, from stool and mouth. So basically people who prepare food, who may not have washed their hands, and who themselves are infected with the virus, can then put particles of the virus into the food they prepare for other people's and cause it to be infected in those people who eat that food. But it can also be spread through intimate contact. So people that you live with, sex partners, or people who you otherwise have intimate contact with can also spread it person to person.
So kissing and sharing forks and spoons.
Exactly.
So now you hear in the news about like hepatitis B and C. There's 5 different types of hepatitis viruses, A to E. Tell us what compares and contrasts A from the rest of them.
So hepatitis, all of the types of hepatitis infect the liver specifically. And some of them you can be vaccinated to prevent you from ever getting sick with them, such as hepatitis A and hepatitis B, but others you cannot be vaccinated to prevent, such as hepatitis C. And it's also variable from one type of hepatitis to another, how you receive it from another person. We talk a lot about hepatitis C being spread by intravenous drug use, people who share needles, and if I had hepatitis C and you used my needle, you could get that virus from me. But then we also think about ones like hepatitis A that we're seeing more recently, and that is more, like we said, through intimate contact. So you don't have to share a needle with someone, you can just be in the same space as them, sharing a household.
Wow. What are some of the symptoms? Like, how would you know that you have hepatitis A?
Yeah, so hepatitis A starts with a really quick onset of symptoms. People have nausea, vomiting, their bellies hurt, plus they have fever, and they genuinely just feel really unwell. But it progresses in days to weeks to also have stool that's a really light color, urine that's a really dark color, and people's bodies can take on an appearance of a yellow discoloration that's called jaundice.
Now, does every case have the jaundice symptom, or does it kind of vary amongst the person?
It does vary. So that's what makes it challenging, because when we talk about the symptoms that are really, really common, again, nausea, vomiting, fever, upset stomach, you can certainly see that in a lot of things. But this illness does, in maybe half to a little bit more of the cases, have that yellowing of the skin, the discoloration of stool and urine. But like you said, it's not in every single case. So it's important to have a high suspicion of the possibility.
Is that not just a hepatitis thing, but something connected with your liver? Is that like a liver symptom?
Yes, exactly. So the liver produces something that affects the color of our stool, of our urine, and of our skin. And that's why when people are infected with hepatitis, whether it's A, B, or C, or others, that they can have that discoloration in their skin. You're absolutely right. Jaundice is specifically linked to liver illnesses.
Wow. Now, are we seeing an outbreak currently here in Ohio?
Yes, we are. And we're not the only state. Throughout the country, we're seeing outbreaks of hepatitis A. But in Ohio specifically, we've seen over 1,500 cases, and in Cuyahoga County, over 20 cases of people who are infected with hepatitis A.
Why do you think that is?
So we don't know the exact evidence-based reason why we're seeing an increase in cases, but we do know how it's being spread between people. And in this case, it's more through intimate contact. So we're not looking at specifically restaurants or food service providers. We're more looking at groups of people that we're seeing it more consistently in and that are transmitting it to each other. But it is a vaccine preventable illness, so we definitely have a response to it. And even in people who don't exist in these specific groups where we're seeing it more commonly, the vaccine is still really important to prevent them from ever getting sick with it.
What are some of the groups and people that are susceptible to getting hepatitis A?
Yeah, and I appreciate you asking that because this is definitely something we want to highlight.
Yeah.
So the most common group that we're seeing in this outbreak in Ohio is people who use street drugs. It doesn't matter if they inject the drugs or use them in a different way. So we're really just talking about street or illegal drugs that people are using. The group, in addition to that we see it in is people who have or were recently incarcerated. We also are seeing it very commonly in people experiencing homelessness or people who have housing insecurity, as well as in men who have sex with men.
You mentioned the outbreak happening in Ohio. Is this outbreak something different from normal hepatitis A? Is there something different to this specific outbreak? And is there a specific group being affected aside from what you just mentioned?
So really those are the specific groups, but that is a significant difference in how we're seeing this outbreak versus other outbreaks of hepatitis. Usually we're looking at a place where people would get food from, like a restaurant or a grocery store, and we're worried about those locations that people are having it transmitted, whereas now we're looking more at how people have intimate contact with each other, either living with each other, being sex partners, using drugs together, or in other ways that they're sharing that intimate space.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we return, we're going to learn about how you can prevent hepatitis A. So stay tuned for more Healthy Cleveland.
One in 6 seniors faces the threat of hunger, and millions more live in isolation.
America, let's do lunch.
Drop off a hot meal and say a quick hello. Volunteer for Meals on Wheels by donating your lunch break at americaletsdolunch.org.
You're running late, and your path is blocked by water crossing the road. It doesn't look that deep, so you decide to drive through it. Bad decision. And it may be your last.
Got a quarter?
Welcome back to Healthy Cleveland. I'm your host, Leah Haslage. Today's topic is hepatitis A. With us is Dr. Natalie Hinchcliffe, who is the medical director with the Cleveland Department of Public Health, and Jordan Bryan, who is our American Sign Language interpreter with the Cleveland Hearing and Speech Organization. So welcome back.
Thanks.
Now, what can people do to prevent getting hepatitis A? Is there anything that they can do now to stop this outbreak from affecting them?
Yes, vaccinate, vaccinate, vaccinate. It is one of the most important things. When we were talking about different types of hepatitis, we don't have a vaccine to prevent every single kind. And some of them are very significant, like hepatitis C. It can be a lifelong illness if you aren't able to get medication. So it's very, very important for people who are a part of these groups where we're seeing higher incidence, as well as people who are not to get vaccinated. It's a 2-part vaccine series. It's 2 given 6 months apart, but we know that even just one of this 2-part series is 95% effective. So more than 9 out of 10 people with one vaccine will get immunity from it, and it lasts for over a decade. From the research that we know, we can assume that it lasts for that long. So absolutely, if you're not sure if you've been vaccinated, you can get vaccinated. If you don't think you'll be able to get the second vaccine, you should still get vaccinated.
That one.
Vaccinate. And of course, the other thing that we talk about with all contagious illnesses is to wash your hands.
Yes.
Like we said, this illness is most commonly spread through the fecal-oral route.
Yeah.
Stool and hand touching that transmit it from people who are preparing or handling food to people who eat that food. So of course, washing your hands after you use the bathroom, washing your hands before you prepare or eat food, washing your hands after you change a baby or child's diaper, and in general, wash your hands.
Just wash your hands.
Wash your hands. When in doubt, wash your hands.
Exactly. Can anyone get the vaccine, or is there like an age limit to it, or if you have already been infected with it, can you get it?
Great question. So yes, most people can get this vaccine, and we actually recommend it for children starting at 12 months of age. So if you have young children, and especially if those young children are in school or daycare, we would recommend that you talk to your doctor or clinician and make sure that your child has had both parts of the 2-part vaccine. And like I said, we start at 12 months of age, so most children are getting it at their first birthday or that first year appointment, and then again 6 months later. There are certain people, though, that we do see that have higher risk of it, and one of those groups is one of the groups that we've seen in this Ohio-specific outbreak to be at greatest risk. That's homeless individuals or people experiencing housing insecurity. They're at 2 to 3 times increased likelihood of getting hepatitis A. So definitely any provider or any people who may be caring for homeless people or providing them care, it's an important population to let them know. But all of us should be vaccinated against hepatitis A. And certainly some of us are at greatest risk from this illness.
Yeah.
We talked about the symptoms: nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, fever. Certainly any of us can get illnesses like that, but there are some of us that are at great risk for those symptoms to cause serious problems. People who are immune compromised, whether that's because they're living with HIV and AIDS, or they have cancer and are on chemotherapy, or people who are very young or very old.
I'm sure as a doctor you've dealt with some people that are vaccinating. Like, what do you tell them when they come to you and say, I don't believe in that?
I think it's really important to try and understand where they're coming from and to not shut people off, but to give them evidence-based, scientific, accurate information. So one of my favorite things to do, if you'll give me your business card, I'll show you what I do with my patients. And I apologize because it will include destroying your business card. So if we say this is the hepatitis A virus itself. So this is the viron particle, as we say in medicine. The vaccine itself is just a part of that. So when you're given the vaccine, you're given part of the virus itself, and your body sees that that little piece is foreign and mounts an immune response to it. And that can make you feel a little bit sick. And that's very commonly what happens when people say, I got the flu shot and it gave me the flu.
Right.
It didn't give them the flu because, again, it's not the whole virus, it's just part of it, but it gave them something their immune system reacted to. And that's a good thing, because when the immune system reacts to a vaccine, it makes an immune response. It makes what's called antibodies. And in that case, if you're later exposed, those antibodies that your body has made will prevent you from ever getting sick with it. So when patients or parents of young ones say that they don't want vaccines because they're worried about the child getting sick or themselves getting sick, I share with them how vaccines work and how it's really impossible for people to get the illness they're being vaccinated for from the vaccination, but how it's definitely possible for people to feel a little bit run down afterwards. I think it's also really important to recognize where people are coming from when they decline vaccines. And for a lot of people, the mistrust they may feel about vaccines or the medical community at large is earned from negative experiences they've personally or their communities have been affected by in the past. So by trying to be as understanding, but also focusing on accurate facts, I think a lot of people end up feeling a bit more comfortable. And the big part, too, is if you give information, you allow people time to kind of think that through and digest that information. And so if someone's not ready for a vaccine at that visit, when I recommend it, I can ask for them to make an appointment or make one for them to come back so we can talk about it again to see if they feel more comfortable.
What is the Cleveland Department of Public Health doing to help spread the word, aside from obviously being here at TV20, but to get out in the community and show people and spread the word about hepatitis A and how the outbreak is affecting us here in Cuyahoga County?
So the most important thing we're doing is offering free vaccines at our 2 clinics to people who are at very high risk for hepatitis A. So that includes J. Glenn Smith on the east side and the McCafferty Clinic here on the west side. We talked about the groups of people who are at greatest risk, and certainly anyone who's been with someone who's previously had hepatitis A or who they spend time with and share intimate space with who is a part of those groups. We recommend that all of those people get vaccinated. And if they go to one of the Cleveland Department of Public Health clinics, they can get that vaccine for free if they're high risk. Also, going to your primary care provider, certainly. Any doctor, nurse practitioner, physician's assistant that you see should be able to give you that vaccine in their office. Cleveland Department of Public Health is also working with the emergency rooms and other federally qualified health clinics in order to try and get more places to have that vaccine available. Because like we said, vaccinate. That's the most important way that we can prevent this outbreak from spreading further.
Places like homeless shelters.
Yes, absolutely. And programs where we go to homeless individuals or offer some service that brings them into us. Because of course, we're talking about populations that it may be difficult to access because they don't have stable housing or because they're not in their home but rather are currently incarcerated. So we're working with our community partners to try and get that information and specifically those vaccines into the right people's bodies as quickly as possible.
Is there anything else that you think people should know about hepatitis A?
I think the most important thing for people to know is that it is a vaccine preventable illness and that it's connected to really good hand hygiene. So if you practice those 2 things, if you get evidence-based vaccines like the hepatitis A vaccine, and if you're diligent about hand hygiene, you don't need to be worried. But you also are empowered in those cases to be able to prevent yourself and your loved ones from getting sick with it.
How can we get more information on hepatitis A and the Cleveland Department of Public Health?
So the Ohio Department of Health website has a lot of information on it, and the Cleveland Department of Public Health is working on that as well. So odh.ohio.gov, as well as the Cleveland Department of Health, like I mentioned. And certainly we hope that we'll be getting more information out on social media and things like that too to reach people in the community.
Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Hinchcliffe. It's been a pleasure having you here, and I know we've all learned a lot today.
Great. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much to Jordan Bryan from the Cleveland Hearing and Speech Center for being here as well. We really appreciate it. And thank you for tuning in to Healthy Cleveland. All this information will be ready for you at tv20cleveland.com as well. I'm Leah Haslage. Until next time.